Starting off this countdown, we have the drug lord. Ismail Zambada Garcia, otherwise known as El Mayo, is a wanted drug lord whose cartel controls much of the heroin production and shipment from Mexico into the US. They also traffic cocaine as well. He has been wanted since 1998. That's when the bounty on him was $2.8 million. Now it's been raised to $15 million. So the government and FBI want this guy badly. But as of now, they have had no success capturing him.
In our number 9 spot today, we have the Watcher. In the summer of 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus had just bought their new 6-bedroom, $1.3 million home in Westfield, New Jersey, and began to do some renovations prior to them moving in. While sorting through some of the mail, they found a small white envelope addressed to, quote, the new owner, so they opened it up and began reading. The letter started off with warm greetings, but quickly turned strange. The couple knew the letter was directed to them because it had mentioned the vehicle they drove, the couple's children, as well as the writer's distaste for the renovations that were being done. If this letter wasn't already creepy enough, it was signed off as the Watcher. I cannot explain to you guys how quickly I would have had that house back up for sale if I received this letter. Over the next few weeks, the family continued to receive more letters from the Watcher, and the letters began to include more personal information. The couple was unsure of where to go or if they should continue their move into this new house, to which I would say, absolutely not. People began to speculate who the Watcher could be, but there was no concrete evidence, and to this day, we still don't know. In our number 8 spot today, we have Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 21st, 1998, Amy and her family boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, which was a Royal Caribbean cruise. On March 24th, after a fun night on the ship, Amy was hanging out and having a couple drinks with the ship's band, and one of the members explained that she parted ways with them around 1 a.m. After this, around 5:15 a.m., Amy's father said he saw her sleeping on the cabin balcony. Unfortunately, however, once 6 a.m. rolled around, she wasn't there anymore, and this was the beginning of the mystery. Once it was realized that Amy was missing, extensive searches were launched for full days before they ended up being called off when no signs or traces of Amy had been found. While this is all super mysterious and nobody really had anything to go on, the plot only thickens with this story. After her disappearance, people began to report seeing Amy. One sighting was by Canadian tourists in 1998 who said that they had seen a woman who resembled Amy and who had tattoos that matched hers on a beach. A member of the United States Navy said that he saw her in a brothel and said that she told him her name was Amy and she asked for help, saying she wasn't allowed to leave. The most recent alleged sighting comes in 2005 when a woman claimed she saw Amy in a department store in Barbados. She said that Amy entered the restroom with 3 men who then threatened her if she didn't follow through on some sort of a deal. The men left briefly and the witness said the woman turned to her and said her name was Amy and that she was from Virginia and needed help, but the men returned right after to take her away again. This story is devastatingly sad and has so many turns, and to this day no one knows exactly what happened to Amy or if these witness sightings were accurate at all. In our number 7 spot today, we have Lester Eubanks. If you're a fan of unsolved mysteries, you might be familiar with this story. Lester is a man who was convicted and sentenced to prison in 1966 for taking someone's life. In December of 1973, Lester was part of an honor assignment that gave him the opportunity to be at the mall to do some Christmas shopping. While at the mall, he ended up escaping custody and has been on the run ever since. Through investigations into his family and friends, police were led to a center for troubled youth where he was said to have been working, but Lester was nowhere to be found when they got there. The most recent development in this case came recently in 2019 when Lester's biological son agreed to give a DNA sample which could be used to link Lester to recent crimes and maybe give an idea on where he could be hiding, but FBI policy says you cannot search using a family member's DNA. It's crazy that someone could be on the run for that long without anyone recognizing or finding them, and it makes me really wonder if anyone in his new life knows about his dark past. In our number 6 spot today, we have Jim Gray. Jim Gray was an incredibly important computer scientist who was responsible for many computer advancements that changed things for all of us. Other than being a computer scientist, he was also an experienced and skilled sailor, and one day on January 28, 2007, he set sail for a short trip so he could head out and spread his mother's ashes as she had recently passed away. As he began his trip, Jim spoke to his wife on the phone and said he would call her once he got back in range. After their phone call, he called his daughter as well and left a little message for her, and then he was off on his trip, but unfortunately he never ended up returning. Jim's wife, Donna, was the one who raised the alarm bells as she was away on a trip, but like I mentioned, Jim said he would call her later, and he never did. This is the point when the huge searches begin. in. Thousands of images of the area where Jim or his boat might be were uploaded to the Amazon Mechanical Turk for people to look through and see if they could find any kind of signs, but to no avail. Jim also had an automatic emergency position indicating beacon on his ship, but whatever happened to Jim and the ship clearly didn't meet the requirements, or perhaps it had some sort of malfunction, or maybe it was even turned off. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jim or his boat, as no sign or trace of either has ever been found. The theories of what may have happened are endless and range from Jim intentionally disappearing to him being kidnapped for his computer skills and brain in order to do some kind of inside job, and literally everything in between. There most definitely are theories that are seemingly more likely than others, but at the end of the day, they are all a possibility. In our number 5 spot today, we have Patricia Meehan. This is a story that really gives me the creeps because it's just so strange. On April 20th, 1989, Patricia Bernadette Meehan was in a car accident on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Witnesses saw her driving her car on the wrong side of the road, which led to her crashing into an off-duty police dispatcher, Carol Heights. Carol was luckily uninjured in the crash and got out of her vehicle right away. Upon exiting her vehicle, Carol saw Patricia also exit her vehicle, walk up to her, and just stare at her without saying a word. Patricia then walked away, climbing over a fence, and stood staring at the accident before walking away and then disappearing. Like, I have goosebumps just talking about this right now. I'm not even joking. It's the weirdest thing. A search began immediately but turned up little results. There have been thousands of reported sightings of Patricia that have potentially given police leads to her whereabouts, but she still has never been found. In our number 4 spot today, we have Lauren Spirer. On June 3rd, 2011, in Bloomington, Indiana, 20-year-old university student Lauren disappeared after a night out with friends. Lauren was from Greenburgh, New York, but had been attending Indiana University. A few hours after being seen leaving her apartment, her boyfriend texted her, only to receive a response several hours later from an employee of a bar who had found her phone. Not much is known about Lauren's disappearance, but it said she left her apartment at around 12:30 a.m., stopped at the bar where her phone was found, and was last seen around 4:30 a.m. leaving a friend's off-campus apartment. Over the course of the years, Lauren's family has tried following every lead they have to find out what happened to her, but have yet to find the answers that they deserve. In our number 3 spot today, we have George Smith. George Allen Smith and his wife Jennifer Hagel Smith had just married and were aboard the MS Brilliance of the Seas, which is a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, as they were doing a Mediterranean cruise for their honeymoon. On July 5th, 2005, the ship was somewhere just off of the coast of Turkey when it was discovered that George had disappeared. The night he was last seen, he was intoxicated from both alcohol as well as prescription drugs, and there was blood evidence found in his cabin as well as on the side of the ship. There were two main theories in regards to his disappearance, the first being that his intoxication led to him falling overboard the ship, and the other was that perhaps a robbery had gone bad and foul play had been involved. This case was investigated for over a decade, with even the FBI and their mafia division getting involved at one point, but despite this, neither George, his body, or what really happened to him has ever been found. There have been many assumptions made over the years, but 16 years later it is still a mystery. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cattle crimes. Okay, so for this one, there were some documents that became declassified, and this is when they revealed this really grim FBI investigation that took place in the mid-1970s at the request of US Senators Floyd Haskell of Colorado and Carl Curtis of Nebraska. I guess there was some weird sort of connection between these horrific things being done to cattle across as many as 21 states. In a letter from 1975, Senator Haskell was able to identify 130 of these strange, macabre cases in Colorado alone. All of the cases were eerily similar, which is really unsettling considering the details. In most of these cases, the cattle would have their left ear, left eye, rectum, and reproductive organs all missing. All of the blood was drained from the carcasses, but there was no blood on the ground around them, nor were there any footprints. How absolutely horrifying is that? Some people chose to believe that the cause for these was mysterious helicopters and UFOs, but there's a letter from Senator Curtis to the FBI director that says, quote, "The series of incidents stretching from Oklahoma to Nebraska in which cattle have been dismembered in some kind of strange witchcraft cult." I'm not gonna lie, I don't think UFOs or witches did it. It wasn't until 1979 that the FBI was granted jurisdiction to begin investigating these weird happenings, and when they did, they determined that most of the instances were a result of, quote, normal predator and scavenger activity. And while that answer sounds a little fishy at best, the documents went forward to reveal that not all of the instances could be accounted for. Also, the idea of it being a completely normal scenario also contradicts reports that say that the techniques used in these horrible instances were very professional and sometimes even referred to as being conducted with surgical precision. I'm sorry, but a wolf or a coyote or a bear or whatever predator you want to say did this, ripping apart its meal isn't exactly a surgically precise operation. No arrests were ever made, and while it was deemed solved, a ton of mystery still surrounds these stories to this day. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Yuba County Five. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California attended a basketball game at California State University. All 5 men went missing after this night, and several days later, the group's car was found abandoned in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest that was way out of the way from where they would have been. There was no reason for the car to have been abandoned because it was in totally fine working condition when it was found. In June of 1978, 4 of the men were found passed away near a trailer camp that was deep in the forest, but the 5th man has still never been found. There is a lot of strange information about this case, such as how one of them starved to death even though he was surrounded by food. There's truly too much to cover about this story that I unfortunately don't have time for, so if you're interested, I would highly recommend looking up this case, as it truly is unexplainable and just totally terrifying. There's a really great recent My Favorite Murder episode where Karen really dives into this story if you want to hear more. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Miami Beach John Doe. In December of 2009, a man was found floating face down by a couple who was walking on the beach in Miami Beach. There weren't any obvious signs of trauma, so authorities really aren't exactly sure what happened to this man or if foul play was involved. One of the most striking things about this case to me is that he was 6'9". I feel like the average person is not that tall, and coupled with the fact that his face was fully recognizable, I feel like he should have been able to be easily identified. He was wearing swim trunks, so it's possible that he may have been swept out to sea, but he also had on shoes and a watch. His estimated time of death was just a few hours prior to his body being found. There's just something about this man being so recognizable and being found so quickly that just really makes me feel like something sinister was going on here. He's estimated to be 25 to 40 years of age. He was 6'9" and 335 pounds with short brown hair and brown eyes and a clean shaven face. Anyone with any information can contact Brittany McLaurin at District 11 Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office or Kenny Matthews at the Miami Beach Police Department.
In our 9th spot, we have Anonymous. Over the years, the hacktivist group Anonymous has exposed a number of large corporations and government officials. They even have exposed the FBI. One of the times being quite recently during June of 2020. Following the killing of George Floyd and the protests, Anonymous leaked hundreds of gigabytes of law enforcement files. Over 269 gigabytes of data were taken from over 200 law enforcement agencies. This included emails, audio recordings, videos, documents. In total, there were millions of files leaked. Some of the leaked documents showed that the FBI was monitoring the social media accounts of protesters, and they were also alerting local law enforcement about anti-police messages. Other documents showed that the FBI was tracking Bitcoin donations to protest groups, as well as highlighted some scandals and police misconduct. Now, some members have been taken down, but the FBI definitely wants the whole group taken down. I mean, what's next on their agenda? In our 8th spot today, we have the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian federal security officer. In 2006, he was poisoned by radioactive polonium-210. He died several days later, and his killer was never caught. Now, before his death, Alexander saw the corruption within the Russian government and he fled to the UK. And that's when he became a huge enemy of Putin, and that's probably why Putin had him killed. He was out revealing a bunch of Russian government secrets. So of course the FBI wants to know who killed him. Now, things have changed a lot. Russia invaded Ukraine, so I can't say if that's still on the FBI's list anymore. In our 7th spot, we have the Jeff Davis 8. Between 2005 to 2008, a number of women's bodies were found in swamps and canals of Jefferson Davis Parish, Louisiana. The women all had connections with each other since they knew each other, and they were all involved in the local drug trade or sex work, and they all died the same way. They were also all said to be police informants. At least they told people close to them that they were. Anyways, their killer has never been caught. Now, of course, there's a number of theories. One is that they all witnessed the death of a drug dealer at the hands of police during a raid gone wrong, and that's why they were killed. The police killed them to cover up the crime. Now, that's the main theory that their families believe, whereas others believe that they died at the hands of a serial killer. No one knows for sure, but the FBI wants to get to the bottom of it. Did they die from a corrupt cop or cops? In our 6th spot, we have America's secret biolabs. There are a number of secret labs in America that are doing dangerous experiments right now. One that's very concerning is that the lab is working with the world's most dangerous pathogens in biosafety. But no one knows where these labs are, what they're exactly researching on, and where their safety records are. Even more concerning is that vials of bioterror bacteria have gone missing, lab mice infected with deadly viruses have escaped, and wild rodents have been found making nests with research waste. Not only that, but cattle infected in a university's vaccine experiments were repeatedly sent to be killed, and then their meat was sold for us to eat. These labs have also apparently had a number of outbreaks over the years as they're working with diseases like Ebola and bird flu. The government has repeatedly denied knowing the location of these places, and people are concerned that the labs are putting the public at risk. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Brian Laundrie. Last year, people worldwide tuned into the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie case. They were hoping for the best, that Gabby would be found safely and would be returned home. Sadly, that wasn't the case. Gabby was found dead and Brian was the prime suspect. He was on the run for a number of days before his supposed dead body was found. But a number of people are suspicious about this whole case. One of the main reasons being they never revealed if they found a body. I believe it was just parts of his skull and his teeth, or his body was just really badly decomposed. I'm not too sure. But they haven't released a whole ton of information. Although it seems like the case is closed, there's a lot more to it than it seems. Since it is still a fairly recent case, the FBI isn't allowed to disclose all the information that they're currently working on. In our 4th spot, we have the Chicago Strangler. Since 2001, at least 55 black women have been found strangled to death in Chicago. The ways in which they die are very similar. Almost all were killed outside or in abandoned buildings and then left in alleys, dumpsters, and other semi-public places. But to the police, they say this isn't the work of a serial killer. Besides the women being strangled and in similar circumstances, there's nothing else that links them together. Now, due to public pressure, the police were forced to actually review the DNA evidence that they gathered. But the DNA found didn't match each other or anyone in the FBI database, which is weird. It suggests that the killer or killers are very careful, but it could be that there are 2 or 3 people working together to perpetrate these attacks. To this day, we still don't have an answer. In our 3rd spot, we have the Long Island serial killer. On May 2nd, 2010, a woman named Shanann Gilbert called 911 saying that someone was chasing her and trying to kill her. She was from Oak Beach near Long Island. She was going around banging on doors, screaming for help. However, no one answered. She was sadly never heard from again. Months later, a body was found in the area. Police thought it would belong to her, but it didn't. It was actually the body of another young woman. After investigating further, 3 more bodies turned up. That's when they knew that they had a serial killer on the loose. Within a few months, police found the remains of a total of 16 people in the area, at least 10 of whom appeared to have been killed by the same person. Gilbert wasn't found until December 2011. To this day, the killer has never been found. In our 2nd spot today, we have the murder of Jean-Marie Townsend. On the night of September 14th, 1954, Jean-Marie Townsend left a party but never made it home. She was found the next morning strangled by her own scarf. Now, there have been a couple of leads over the years. For example, a man with scratches all over his face apparently gave bloody clothes to the dry cleaner and asked them to clean it, but I don't think this man was ever found. Now, rumor has it that an American soldier was responsible for her death. Again, I don't think he was ever found. Shortly after, the area in which she was murdered became known as a murder mile. That's because a number of other young girls in the area claimed that they were also attacked and strangled by their scarves. 2 years later, on September 7th, 1956, a woman named Diana Suttie was also murdered by her scarf and then dumped from a car. Her murder was similar to how Jean-Marie was killed. To this day, her killer has never been found. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the death of Betty Shanks. The murder of Betty Shanks is one of the oldest and most notorious unsolved murder cases in Queensland, Australia. In 1952, Betty was found dead and her body was in terrible condition. There were no suspects and no leads as to what happened to her. Now, one theory was created by Australian historian Lyle Reed. He had been working on this case for many years, and he believes that a policeman actually killed her with his motorcycle and then staged a whole cover-up.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Long Island serial killer. Also known as the Craigslist Ripper, the LISK is an unidentified suspect who is believed to have taken the lives of 10 to 16 people over the last 20 years. The victims so far that are known have been sex workers who used Craigslist to advertise their work. After the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, police were searching an area along the Ocean Parkway, and that is when they began to discover the remains of the victims. The first 4 were found in December of 2010, with another 6 being found in March and April of 2011. As of December 2015, the FBI is now officially involved in the investigation. There has been a suspect in the case, but any formal charges have not been laid in terms of these crimes. The most recent evidence in regards to the case was a belt found at the scene of the crime, which may potentially belong to the killer. At the same time, it was announced that new scientific evidence was being used in the investigation, but these announcements came just last year, so we have yet to receive any further updates. Hopefully this case is solved quickly so that the family of the victims can receive justice and this terrible person is off the streets for good. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Jackson County John Doe. In 1981, a man was struck by a vehicle and has never been able to be identified. This would have just been a regular, albeit tragic, John Doe case, but it really took an even darker turn. In 2014, a newspaper published a morgue photo of this John Doe in an attempt to receive some new leads. Well, they got more than they bargained for when someone contacted authorities saying that the man looked like one on the FBI's most wanted list. This person thought the John Doe looked like William Bradford Bishop Jr., who was wanted for taking the lives of his own family in 1976. Because of this tip, the authorities had to exhume the body of the John Doe, who turned out to not be this killer at all. Unfortunately, the John Doe has still never been identified. He was described as approximately 55 years old, a white male with blue eyes, brown/gray hair, 5 feet 9 inches, and 155 pounds. Anyone with information on this John Doe should call the Scottsboro Police Department. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Max Headroom Guy. Really taking a twist from what we've just talked about. On November 22nd, 1987, a man wearing a Max Headroom mask hijacked 2 separate television broadcasts in Chicago, Illinois. The man was basically speaking nonsense and just moaning and screaming throughout, and the audio was extremely distorted. He interrupted the sports segment on the 9 o'clock news for about 25 seconds, and then a few hours later he interrupted a broadcast of Doctor Who for about 90 seconds. The whole thing was very weird, and the second interruption featured some fairly inappropriate behavior, such as the moment when he partially exposed his butt, and an unidentified woman came into the shot and he started smacking his butt with a fly swatter. I'm unsure why someone would hijack a television broadcast for basically just nonsense, but I guess maybe he was just trying to have a good time. While the charges for this incident could have left the man with jail time and a $100,000 fine, no one has been able to figure out who this man or even the woman who helped him are. I wonder if we'll ever get answers because I have so many questions. In our number 7 spot today, we have Monique. In January of 2015, 3 bird watchers in a park in the Gravesend area of Brooklyn, Kings County, New York found a decomposed right hand laying in the sand. The hand was right on the shoreline of Coney Island Creek, and it seemed as though it had been in the water for quite some time. The next day, authorities searched the area and found a foot which had been smoothly cut around the ankle. For the next 3 months, they were unable to find any more parts until on March 22nd, 3 teenagers headed into a wooded area near the creek around 1,000 yards from where the other parts had been found. The teenagers saw the skeleton of a rib cage and spine and of course called the police. Authorities searched again and found a leg on the ground and an elbow hanging from a tree. Upon examination, they could confirm that all the parts belonged to the same person. There isn't much to go on, but it seemed as though they were put into the water, and when they washed ashore, they were dragged to their locations by different animals. This Jane Doe is described as a black female from 20 to 45. She was most likely around 5'3" to 5'9", and although a head was not found, through DNA mapping, it is most likely she had black hair and brown eyes. There has been a facial approximation of what she may have looked like. She had a tattoo on her right calf that was red and green. It was a heart and a rose with the name Monique. Investigators are unsure if that was her name or the name of someone close to her. Other details are that she had a broken rib at some point in her life, and that she had a mesh artery stent within the tissue of her pelvis and an intrauterine device, which means that she has definitely had surgery before. Anyone with any information on this case are asked to contact the New York City Police Department or the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, or if you wish to remain anonymous, you can do so by calling New York Crime Stoppers. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Jefferson County Jane Doe. In January of 1993, the head of a woman was found in Wayne Fitzgerald State Park. Unfortunately, the rest of her body has never been found, which is both deeply disturbing as well as frustrating, since it has left authorities very little to go on. One thing that they were able to figure out from the head was that whoever this woman was, she suffered from a condition called torticollis or wry neck, which would have caused her head to be slightly tilted towards the left. This is a really rare condition, so people who knew her really should have had an easy time recognizing her, or at least coming forward if they knew anyone with the condition who had gone missing. People think the head may have been thrown out of a car window as it drove past, which is just incredibly upsetting. She would have been somewhere from 30 to 50 years old with shoulder-length reddish brown hair. Anyone with information about this case should direct it to Illinois State Police Zone 7 investigations. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Doodler. While this nickname sounds very sweet, it, like most everything else on this list, is very sinister. The nickname that this unidentified killer received is due to his practice of sketching his victims before taking their lives. This unidentified killer committed their crimes in the San Francisco area from January of 1974 to September of 1975, and they specifically targeted the gay community. It is believed that 14 deaths can be attributed to this killer, while 3 others were injured in the process. Unfortunately, because of the stigma and sensitivity surrounding gay men at the time, the 3 who survived this monster were very reluctant when speaking with authorities for fear of being outed as a result of it. This has led to there being very little information for them to work with in terms of identifying the man responsible. For a while there was a primary suspect, but that person has never been officially charged because, sadly, none of the survivors felt comfortable enough to testify in court. There's a very real chance that authorities know who the killer is, but just don't have the evidence to prove it in a court of law. That truly is a terrifying thought. In our number 4 spot today, we have Jack the Ripper. One of the most famous serial killers who was never caught, and to this day, no one knows who he is. The Jack the Ripper killings popped up in England in the year 1888. There were 3 separate women that were killed, and at first it would seem like they had no connection, but after some investigating, it started to look as if a serial killer was on the loose because each of the women was killed in the same gruesome way. One of the most eerie parts of these crimes was the precision. It would seem that his killings were performed by someone with a deep medical knowledge, possibly a doctor or a surgeon. Everything about the killings heightened when Scotland Yard received the letter from hell. It was apparently written by Jack the Ripper, and it spoke of a detailed breakdown of how he was committing his crimes and how much he enjoyed it. Is anyone else freaked out right now? Some people thought that this could have been a hoax that the newspaper threw together so that they could sell more papers. You send one creepy letter and the next thing you know you're making millions, baby. But the authenticity of this letter was elevated when a human kidney was also sent to Scotland Yard. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Zodiac Killer. This one had to make it on this list because although these stories are terrifying and horrible, the story of the uncaught and unidentified serial killer known as the Zodiac is truly one of the most mysterious stories. The Zodiac Killer took the lives of 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October of 1969. He was most known for targeting young couples or a lone male cab driver. Despite 2 people luckily and thankfully escaping his attempted evil doings, he has still never been caught. He was one of those weird ones who left notes and stuff for the police to find. There are of course many people who think the Zodiac has been identified, I'm sure we'll see some of them in the comments, but while no one has heard from the Zodiac since 1974, the case remains active in many different counties and it is yet to be officially solved. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Sleepy Hollow Killer. Starting in 1997, there was a series of killings in an area of South Africa, and they are all believed to be linked to an unidentified suspect who is being called the Sleepy Hollow Killer. During this time, it was believed that 13 crimes could be attributed to this person, and despite investigations, whoever the perpetrator was, authorities were unable to identify them. There was a small hiatus from the crimes, which is sometimes referred to as a cooling off period, but in 2007 they unfortunately began again. While the more recent crimes varied slightly from the originals, authorities believe it is the same person, active yet again. There has only been one public suspect in this case, but unfortunately it is no longer believed that he had anything to do with these crimes, and that the one he committed was entirely separate. It really is horrifying to think of people who do things like this being able to get away with it for so many years, so let's just hope that he is caught very soon. The good news is that a special task team has been formed in order to really look into these crimes and explore and examine all of the circumstances, modus operandi, and all of the material evidence. In our number 1 spot today, we have the alphabet. There are a lot of scary people on this list today, and this one is certainly no exception. The alphabet killings are a series of unsolved crimes named because of how each victim had their first initial that matched their last. So their first name and their last name started with the same letter. They know the crimes are linked, or at least have reason to suspect they are, because of a similar MO that includes how the life was taken and where the remains were placed afterwards. They were all taken in a similar area around a similar time. There are theories and suspects as to who could have committed these horrific crimes, but as of right now, no one knows for sure. These crimes were committed between 1971 and 1973 in Rochester, New York, and because of the timing, it's possible that whoever committed these crimes could still be alive, but perhaps they might not be. Authorities, despite having an immensely difficult job placed in front of them, are still committed and trying to solve this case.